In the previous chapter, we talked about what we were looking for when we were recruiting and when we were selecting people. Now, the two basic approaches that we looked at back in chapter 1 was we talked about what are called job analysis and person specifications. Job analysis, if you remember, simply says the most important thing is to work out exactly what the tasks are going to be so that you can recruit somebody, you can select somebody who has got the right skills, the right experience, the right knowledge in order to do those tasks. So in other words, you decide exactly what the person is going to do, and then that's the person that you select. You select the best person to do those tasks. Person specifications are the complete opposite. With a person specification, we don't necessarily know exactly what the tasks are going to be. What we're more interested in is we're more interested in getting the right kind of person who can adapt as the tasks, as the job changes. So, job analysis, there are the tasks that you are going to do. Let's get the right person. Person specification, let's get the right person and then worry afterwards about what they are going to do. And so we go through our recruitment agents and our job adverts and our assessment centres and our interviews, and we select the correct person. Now, one thing that we haven't talked about, because we didn't talk about it in chapter 1, is are there any other considerations that you want to have when you are deciding on who is this right kind of person? Chapter 2 is all about something called diversity. And diversity is something that is very, very important to the ACCA. As most of you will know, the ACCA is a worldwide qualification. There are students and there are members of the ACCA all around the world. And the ACCA want you to be able to get jobs all around the world. Now, that might well mean that you get a job in a different place to the place that you are living now, or in a different place to the place that you've studied. Now, most organisations, or certainly a lot of organisations, will want to recruit and select people who are similar to the workers who are already there. So, if you are working in the finance department of a UK company, you might well naturally want to recruit another UK person to fill any vacancies. What we're going to look at in chapter 2 is why it's actually a good idea to recruit people who are not necessarily from the UK. So the idea in chapter 2 is going to be that we're going to look, in addition to the personality of the person, in addition to the skills and the experience of the person, we're going to look for what their person's background is, so we can try and encourage people and employ people who've got different kinds of backgrounds. Now, there's two distinct stages to this. The first one we're going to look at is called equal opportunities. Second one we're going to look at is called diversity. And it's a topic, as I say, that the ACCA take very, very seriously, because they want to encourage employers to have a large range of different accountants working for them, bringing a lot of different skills, a lot of different experience, a lot of different backgrounds to be working in a finance department. So the ACCA think this is very serious. So, first of all then, we have the ideas behind what's called equal opportunities. Equal opportunities, you can see in the notes, it means that people are treated fairly in the employment process. Also, everyone has the right to be treated fairly at work. So the idea behind equal opportunities is that everybody has the same chances to be recruited, the same chances to progress within the organisation. Because it's a UK exam, there are various pieces of UK legislation that you have to be aware of. Now, it's not a legal exam, it's a multiple choice exam for accountants. So it's not a legal exam. You don't need to know these in great detail, but you do need to know roughly what's going on with them. The first of them that we have is what's called the Equal Pay Act, which is obviously trying to make sure that men and women are treated fairly, particularly as far as pay is concerned. So a man and a woman who are basically doing the same job with the same responsibilities should be paid the same amount of wages, is basically what that is saying. Please note that the Equal Pay Act does not say that men and women should be paid the same. It only says they should be paid the same if they're doing the same tasks and if they've got the same responsibilities. If there are differences there, if the women are taking on more responsibilities than the men, or they're doing harder tasks, then they get paid more money. So the Equal Pay Act. The Disability Discrimination Act simply says that you are not allowed to discriminate against anybody on the grounds of whether they have a disability or not, as long as that will not affect the way that they do their job. So, for example, I cannot see any reason why you couldn't have a lecturer who was sitting in a wheelchair. To me, that would make no difference whatsoever to the quality of their lecturing. So the Disability Discrimination Act would mean that if a disabled person in a wheelchair came along and said, I want to be a lecturer, I'm going to apply, then the college would have to treat them exactly the same as everybody else. And if they're the best candidate, they get the job. Similarly, the Race Relations Act, which is doing exactly the same thing, except it's based on people's race, their skin colour, rather than anything else. So the idea behind all three of these is people should not be discriminated against. So you shouldn't pay men more than women. You shouldn't employ a white person rather than a black person for the same kind of job. It's basically looking at, are they the right person? Have they got the right skills? That is all that should matter. Nothing else should do. Obviously, if a company breaks those regulations, then the person who has been discriminated against would be able to take the company to court to sue them. So if I was turned down for a job purely on the basis of race, then I would be able to take that potential employer to court. So, equal opportunities. Companies are forced to do this in the UK by law, but the law is a minimum standard. Companies might want to do more than what the law says. They might feel that they have to do it because they feel they have a moral duty. There is an ethical issue. So, I will treat everybody fairly, not because I have to, because I want to. And it could also be important to keep your customers happy. We'll see that again in a few minutes' time. But the idea might well be that we would get a bad reputation if we only employed one kind of person. So we want to have different opportunities for people. Because after all, our customers almost certainly come from different backgrounds, so it makes sense for our staff too. Down at the bottom, it also includes, as well as recruitment and selection, it includes things like training, it includes things like promotions. So if I was to say, for example, that all the men in my company can go on training courses but all the women can't, then I am breaking equal opportunities legislation. If I say that all the white people have a chance of being promoted and all the black people do not, again, I am breaking this legislation. I'm actually breaking the law. The other thing is redundancies. So redundancies, as you may well know, is when you have to let people go because there is no work. So if we're going to make redundancies, it's often because a company is doing badly and needs to save money. Everybody needs to be treated the same. So again, you cannot simply say we will make all the women redundant. You know, you've got to do it fairly. However you do it may be based on experience or skills or knowledge or whatever, but everybody should be just as likely to be made redundant, just as everybody was just as likely to be trained. So the idea behind equal opportunities is that you are not discriminating against everybody. You treat everybody the same. Opposite of that, diversity is not treating everybody the same. It is discriminating. But the idea is that you discriminate. You try and bring in people who are underrepresented in your organisation. So if you have let's imagine that you have a group of accountants who are all, again, just for discussion, you've got a group of accountants who are all middle-aged white men. Yeah, obviously I fall into that group. That's the reason that I'm using it as an example. Equal opportunities, you get 10 people who turn up for an interview for a job and you treat them all the same. And it might well be that you choose another white middle-aged man because you feel that he's the best candidate. But you didn't choose him because of that, you chose him because he was the best candidate. Diversity, on the other hand, means deliberately encouraging different people into the organisation. So you might deliberately choose somebody from a different ethnic background, from a different race. You might deliberately choose somebody from a different religious background, but you are deliberately choosing people who are different to the staff that you've had previously. So it's not equal opportunities at all. Equal opportunities, everybody's treated the same. With diversity, they are not treated the same. The difference is that we are trying to include more people in our organisation from different backgrounds. So we are deliberately encouraging those kind of people. So diversity means that we are going to have different people in our organisation. So you might, for example, have a variety of religions, races, marital status. So all of those might well be sensible ways to try and encourage different kinds of workers. So you've always had workers who've got the same kind of background. Now you're trying to encourage workers who are different. Genders, we could decide to include we could try and aim towards having a mixed workforce of men and women. Sexual orientation, again, what we could look at is we could look at employing heterosexual and homosexual employees. The idea is, again, to have lots of different kinds of workers with lots of different backgrounds inside our organisation. Now, diversity, then, is trying to achieve this. Diversity management is how you actually do this. Now, there are various organisations that have things like diversity programmes. They might even have somebody in charge of this. So giving an example, imagine that we are talking about accountants. We've got a finance department and we want to encourage a mixture of different people to work in our finance department. It might mean that we actively have to go and advertise in different places to where we've advertised before. We've always placed adverts in the same kind of places, in the same kind of newspapers or in the same kind of magazines. So we've always ended up with the same kind of people applying. So we've always selected somebody who is similar to what we've already got. So diversity management, right, where do we need to go and find these other people then? If they don't read the newspapers that we advertise in at the moment, what would they read? How do we find out where they are? So diversity management means actively going out and trying to get different kinds of people from different backgrounds, which means doing something different to what we do at the moment. So there are a number of benefits to this, and this is the bit that ACCA are particularly interested in. Why would you bother? First of all, you get more ideas. If everybody in your organisation has the same background, they probably think the same way. They've had the same kind of experiences. They've been brought up watching the same television programmes. They've attended the same kind of schools. They've got qualifications in the same kind of areas. Bring in different people who've got their own ideas. Then you'll have more of a mixture. The second point, when you are making a decision, it makes sense to think about that decision from lots of different perspectives, from lots of different points of view. Again, if everybody is the same, they will only think about it from that one point of view. So having a mixture of people in your workforce allows you to think about that in lots of different kinds of ways. Perhaps one of the biggest ones, a better understanding of your customers. Customers are not all the same. They are very, very different. One of the things that I notice as a lecturer is you get a very big difference in the kind of students that you have. Even within the same class, there was a big mixture from different countries, different backgrounds, different ethnic minorities, different religions, different ways of studying, a lot of different languages. And it's very difficult to try and understand what all those customers want if all the employees in a company have all got the same background. Now, that's one of the ones that say that the ACCA are very, very keen on. More understanding of customers if you have people who've got different backgrounds. The more different backgrounds you've got, the more likely it is that somebody has got a similar background to some of your customers. They will understand what those customers want. And finally, increased chance of being successful in new markets. We'll talk about this later on in the course, but one of the things you may want to do is you may want to take your products and sell them to different customers, customers that you've never sold things to before. Well, how will you know what those customers want? If you've got people on your staff who've got similar backgrounds, they will be able to help and work out what those customers might actually want. So diversity is a very important thing as far as the workforce is concerned. You can simply employ people and hope that you end up with a diverse workforce. You simply advertise a job, you choose who you think is the best person, and you might get a mixture of people and you might not. Diversity management, you will deliberately go out and get different kinds of people. You deliberately choose them to make your workforce as diverse as you possibly can. Now, there are lots of examples around the world of organisations that have deliberately done this, but a very good relevant example at the moment is in London, the police force. Probably up until about 5-6 years ago, the police force in London was traditionally white and mainly male. There were some female police officers, but the vast bulk of police were male and white, which suited the way things were probably 40 or 50 years ago when the vast bulk of the population was white. But as there has been more immigration coming into the UK, as we've got more diverse population living, particularly in London, it was found that the police force were out of touch with what people actually thought. Basic things like not necessarily speaking the same language, not necessarily having the same attitudes, and so it was felt that the police force needed to be more diverse. So over the last few years, the police force in London has deliberately gone out and tried to reach out and recruit people from different backgrounds. The idea then is whatever kind of people you come across, whatever kind of people the police force come across, whatever kind of disputes that there is somebody that those people can relate to, somebody who's got the same kind of background who will understand them. And it's been a big change in the way that the police force in London operates, and it has now got probably one of the more diverse workforces, I would think, out of any large city, certainly in Europe, as far as its police force is concerned. But it's only happened because they've deliberately gone out and done it. They've gone out and recruited people from different backgrounds, and they've changed their selection techniques and changed their selection criteria, changed their training so that they can encourage people to want to join the police force, and then once they've joined, to try and stay there. So it's a good example of how a particular organisation has deliberately made an effort to change to reflect the needs of their customers. So ACCA, very, very keen on diversity because it allows ACCA students around the world, different backgrounds, to work in lots of different situations in different companies around the world. So in the exam, the big thing to remember about diversity and equal opportunities is the rules for equal opportunities, and for diversity, why it is a good idea.